Is it possible to imagine that email and phone surveillance is not an infringement into someone's personal life?
Is it possible to imagine that email and phone surveillance is not an infringement into someone's personal life? This springs from the now very fiercely contested view of the government that the rights of the state to have access to aspects of people's private lives in the form of letters and telephone calls should be extended to emails and phones. John Redwood,
well, of course,
what do you make of it?
Any surveillance of our communications is an infringement on our civil liberties and our private lives. So we have to ask, first of all, what infringement do they have in mind? And secondly, is there a good reason for it? The infringement they have in mind is that they want all of the calls that we might make on the internet or Skype to be logged by a private system, not by the state itself, as to the number dialed and how long the call lasted, and that record be kept by the service provider for a year. And were the authorities to need to get access to the underlying emails or the underlying content of the call, then they would still need a warrant in the normal way, which they could go and get anyway today. But they would have that extra bit of intelligence about what was out there in terms of communications data. So the government says this is a rather small increase, and it's going to be held by the private sector, and there is no ability for the government to read your emails or listen into your calls, other than the way they have at the moment, as a warrant. And it is certainly better than the Labour idea, which got dumped, of the Big Brother database, which the government was going to hold at considerable expense with rather more information. But what I would say is that this is all done in the name of anti-terrorism. I'm getting fed up with living in a country that always has to live with this fear of terrorism. It's been all my adult life now. We had all this with the Irish. And then I think John Major and Tony Blair did something rather wonderful. And they weren't my favourite politicians, but I think they did something really good, because they decided to take that very brave step and talk to terrorists and work for a political solution after years of terror and bombs and fighting. And it is a lot better now, thanks to the initiative they made. I think we need to get the troops out of Afghanistan. I think if we wish to remain involved in the Middle East, we need to do more talking and less fighting. And I think we need to have a much better initiative to try and make sure that we are not the target for terrorism that the authorities seem to think we are. And then we could have the civil liberties back that we all want.
As John Redwood pointed out, Ben Bradshaw, it was the case that the Labour government wanted this in spades, because you wanted to have a huge centrally held bank of data. So is that why Labour on this has been so immensely quiet over the last few days?
I don't think we have been. Ed Miliband has called for the government to scrap this proposal and go back to the drawing board. And we're not just talking about the surveillance of
the questioner. Is that back to Labour's old position?
No. We're not just talking about what the questioner asked about surveillance. We're also talking about having inquests in secret. Look, there's always a tension between civil liberties and our security. But as a rule, I think the British public have been sensible and tolerant about the need in some cases for our liberties to be restricted in order to protect our security. Airport security is a classic example where people accept the need for a bit of hassle at the airport in the hope that there won't be a bomb on their plane. I think the problem that we've had with this, which is rather typical of this government in my view, is it hasn't explained what the problem is it wants to solve with these measures. When it has done, it hasn't done it with one voice. You've had Nick Clegg on Monday saying he's all in favour of the plans, then on Wednesday saying he's against them, and then today saying, oh, he's even more against them. What we need is the government to go back to the drawing board, come up with a set of proposals that are based on evidence, not what the security services say they want, not what the police say they want, but based on evidence and testing the claims of the security services, and then coming to us with some proposals that we can discuss and build some national consensus around.
Nigel Farage.
Well, it's all a bit rich, this debate, isn't it? When Labour were in government, they wanted to have a big centralised database, and the Tories and Lib Dems screamed about it, and now they're in government, they want the internet service providers to hold it on their behalf. And, you know, it's a ridiculous, nonsensical debate. Of course it's an infringement, referring back to our question. Look, the job of a UK government is to protect our liberties, not to abolish them. And that, it seems to me, is what's going on here. But there's a bigger question here. I know Jonathan won't like this at all, because we're supposed to not discuss Europe here. because
Well, it
that's
hasn't
meant to
stopped you
that's
talking
meant to
about
be
it
entirely
repeatedly.
foreign, and the entire panel will deny it as well. But please ask yourselves, why is this happening? And why is this government attempting to do the same thing that the last government tried to do? It's because of a European directive that came in 2002 and was updated in 2006 that makes it a requirement under national law in this country that we make telephone providers, internet service providers, and that is now to be updated, keep the information for a minimum of a year. And if you were worried, any of you, that this data could be accessed by the UK government, please think more broadly than that. This data can be accessed by 27 other governments in Europe. That is why this is happening, and this issue exposes the extent to which our political class are in total denial about the extent to which they have given away our ability to run our own country.